What is everybody? Welcome back to Truth and Transparency. Idaho4 Molly McMichael's enhanced audio interview with Detective Payne on November 23rd, 2022. That's going to be up here in just a minute. But first, this is the enhanced version. If you joined us earlier, you've already heard it or attempted to hear it. We jacked up the sound. We tried to take out the background whack noise. So again, it's coming up here. Let's talk about some things first, though. Molly McMichael bought a new cell phone right after the murders. Molly McMichael bought 4 new tires right after the murders. Nothing to see here. Wow. Like, did you guys see that in Detective Payne's report? Because I sure as hell did not. Again, Molly McMichael bought a new cell phone and bought 4 new tires. Nothing to see here. Ooh. Also, she mentions that the person that she saw had like a scruffy beard, not like some full beard, but like more than a couple days worth. And yeah. Okay. Blonde, spiky hair, short, spiky hair with, like reddish, blondish, spiky hair. Her ex-boyfriend back in the day told her that the Queen Road Apartments is like the white Harlem. Interesting. She also was door dashing that day for about 18 hours. 18 hours. Okay. 18 hours. Let's see if you get up like at, 9 a.m. And let's say you work till 9 p.m. That's 12 hours. Okay. I think it's pretty impressive that Molly McMichaels could even be up at a stretch of 18 hours, let alone working for 18 hours. Okay. She also said that she was double dashing. We're going to get into all of this. She does talk about how she saw the underwear in the street. There was 2 pairs of underwear, in the street. She mentions that in her interview. Also, if you're just joining us, you didn't see it earlier. Without a doubt, 1,000%, Molly McMichael was interviewed before this. And if the Idaho State Police didn't do it, then the only people that could have would be the FBI. Okay. Not only was she interviewed before this, because she tells that she's like, how I told you guys before, blah, blah, blah. She was also called numerous times by the police department, by the police in general. Could that be, Idaho State Police or FBI, MPD? But they were trying to get in contact with Molly. So check this out. And she's like, I didn't have my voicemail set up yet. But she's had the past couple days leading up into this interview were really stressful for her. You guys, the FBI did a pen trap and trace on this woman. If she is just a DoorDash driver, her name's Molly McMichael, right? Hey, we call her up. We reach out to her. Hey, we need to talk to you about the King Road, murders. Okay, why? Well, were you over in that area? You know what I mean? Like, where is any of that? Where is this recorded call of like the initial talk to her about how you even found out Molly, when you found out who Molly was? Where are these recorded calls of you ever talking to her to begin with, to like before you get to this interview? Well, I can tell you they're not in the 314 different page reports of MPD, and they're not in the, 600 pages of the Idaho State Police reports. Where is that? So that means that Ann Taylor would have had been asking for all of that stuff, because I highly doubt that the FBI was just turning over their reports. It just didn't happen. Okay, what we're looking at here before we get to the video. What you guys are seeing on the screen. Brian Culver is going to be back in court, but it's over some bullshit. This is, in my opinion, ridiculous. The state filed a request for restitution and motion to seal exhibit. So comes now the state of Idaho by and through the Latah County prosecuting attorney and respectfully moves the court for orders of restitution herein against the defendant and in favor of Steve and or Christy in the amount of $20,409 and in the favor of Karen, $6,920. In support of this request, the state refers the court and counsel to the documentation appended here to Exhibit 1, which is a sealed 17-page document. Defense counsel has indicated they will meet with defendant this week to discuss a possible stipulation. The state will advise the court if a restitution hearing is needed. Okay? So, well, guess how that meeting went? Not good, because the defendant then files an objection. Okay? And I'm going to share this on screen. So this is the defendant's objection. And right here, the defendant objects to the state's request for additional restitution. Comes now Brian C. Culver by and through his attorney of record and hereby objects to the state's request for additional restitution filed September 22nd, 2025. The grounds for objection are: 1, the plea agreement specified and was specific to funeral expenses and funds reimbursed through Idaho's Crime Victim Compensation Fund in the amount to be determined within 60 days from July 23rd, 2025. Mr. Culver stipulated to those amounts, resulting in court orders in the amounts of $28,956 on August 29th. And number 2, the additional funds sought do not qualify as an economic loss under Idaho Code 19-5304 because Steve and Christy Gonzalez, as well as Karen, received extensive funds through multiple GoFundMe campaigns. So why they're saying that number 2 is because they received money from third-party donors, basically. And that's part of the Idaho Code, according to Ann Taylor, right? And there's a third reason. Mr. Culver has no ability now or in the future to pay restitution because he is serving 4 consecutive life sentences plus 10 years. The procedural history. So then Ann Taylor wants to talk about this a little bit. And she gives this rundown. A judgment was entered against Mr. Culver on July 23rd, 2025. The plea agreement stated that the state may seek restitution orders regarding funeral expenses and crime victims' compensation reimbursement in the amount to be determined. The judgment of conviction ordered $251,227.50. $20,000 as civil judgment for each of the families named in the indictment, and also directed the state, quote unquote, to notice restitution for hearing if parties cannot stipulate to an amount within 60 days. With respect to the Crime Victims Compensation Program and funeral expenses, the parties so stipulated on August 27, 2025 to $28,956.88, and corresponding orders were entered. On September 22nd, 2025, the state filed its state's request for restitution and motion to seal exhibit, seeking an additional $20,499.32 for Christy and Steve and $6,920.32 for Karen. An itemized statement with receipts was attached under seal. No documentation showing reimbursement by the Crime Victims Compensation Fund was included. The receipts related to travel and accommodation. Plea agreement. The plea agreement is unambiguous about the restitution categories Mr. Culver agreed to pay, and once receipt and verification was provided, he stipulated accordingly. So the court must consider contractual terms that are expressly provided in the plea agreement, as well as those contractual terms that are implied. And Taylor there is quoting State versus Fowler. Given the express language in the plea agreement, the only additional receipts submitted that may fall within the contractual terms are those for the earns. The state has an obligation to stand by the terms of the plea agreement that Mr. Culver relied upon. Economic loss. Economic loss includes, but is not limited to, the value of property taken, destroyed, broken, or other harmed, lost wages, and direct out-of-pocket losses or expenses, such as medical expenses resulting from the criminal conduct, but does not include less tangible damage such as pain and suffering, wrongful death, or emotional distress. Several GoFundMe campaigns resulted in funds raised for the families. Specifically, one GoFundMe campaign for Maddie and Kaylee raised $73,483. These funds were promoted as going to both families. They actually visited that site on October 6th. Another GoFundMe campaign for Karen raised $48,000 to quote unquote help Maddie's family attend the Idaho trial, and also clarify that the funds were in fact used to travel to Boise for hearings, including the sentencing. A third GoFundMe campaign for Stephen Christie raised $85,000 for the purpose of attending the court hearings in Boise after the venue was changed. And again, those were all visited on October 6th. Given the specific funds sought and obtained for expenses to travel to Boise, the request should be denied because neither family suffered an economic loss for that which the state seeks reimbursement. Both families did indicate a desire to refund any donations after the case resolved after sentencing, but whether they were able to accomplish this or donors requested funds returned is not included in the state's motion. Basically, Ann Taylor is saying that Brian's inability to pay. So based on Idaho Code Section 19-5304, provides guidance in determining whether restitution would be appropriate and states that the court should consider the amount of economic loss sustained by the victims as a result of the offense, financial resources, need, and earning ability of the defendant. So economic loss is addressed above, and in light of the GoFundMe donations, the specific funds for which the Gonsalves family and Karen seek reimbursement, which was travel to Boise, there is no sustained economic loss. Additionally, Mr. Culver has no ability to earn money or pay money given his 4 consecutive life sentences plus 10 years. Unlike other cases where the Idaho courts have ordered restitution for short and long prison sentences, Mr. Culver's is different. He will never have the ability to pay restitution, and even though he stipulated to restitution amounts, there is no foreseeable ability for him to ever make payment. Under Idaho law, he will never be able to profit by way of book, movie, or entertainment of any kind. And so this had me saying wait, what? Now she's saying, by Ann Taylor saying this, it was okay, he won't be able to do that. For all the reasons stated above, there you go. Now, the state then comes back and says, hang on, hold tight. And Ashley Jennings files this motion. The state responds to the defendant's motion as follows. And that's interesting. Here you go. So basically, ready. All you ProBurgers out there. This was filed on 10/24. State's response to defendant's objection to request for restitution. So now comes Ashley Jennings, and the state acknowledges the Rule 11 plea agreement filed herein. Regarding restitution under Section 4, the agreement states that the state may seek restitution orders regarding funeral expenses and crime victims' compensation reimbursement in the amount to be determined. At the time of the plea agreement, the state was under the impression certain expenses incurred by the victims' families would be covered by the crime victims' compensation. Okay. Well, I'm confused because I thought that they were going to be reimbursing that regardless if it was covered or not. So am I missing something? See right here. The state may seek restitution orders regarding funeral expenses and crime victims' compensation reimbursement in an amount to be determined. And then Ann Taylor's over here yeah, we already did that with the reimbursement. And here, Ashley Jennings is saying the state was under the impression certain expenses incurred by the victims' families would be covered by crime victims' compensation. Why would you be under that impression? It's just, you didn't do the work. Okay. You obviously didn't you just thought that it would be. What do you mean you were under the impression. Why wouldn't you ask that question? Because yet here we go. The families are getting, for the families have to even be involved in something like this. But after the sentencing hearing, the state was informed that crime victims' compensation will not cover travel and lodging expenses for attendance of court proceedings. And so here probably what happened is the Gonsalveses and Karen, they submitted their bills. Like, here you go. This is what it cost. Okay. And then they're realizing, oh, wait, we can't. Like, what? But if that's how it went down, that's also interesting because what they're basically saying is you guys can read between the lines there. On behalf of the victims, so now Ashley Jennings and Bill, on behalf of the victims, where have you been? Where have you been? Where have you been? Now here they are. On behalf of the victims, here we are. Okay. On behalf of the victims, the state submits the itemization of expenses that were incurred by the families, including expenses not covered by the crime victims' compensation for the court's consideration, and that would be exhibit number 1. Now, the state is affirmatively advocating. Really? You guys haven't affirmatively advocated for anything, but here we are. We're affirmatively advocating for payment of funeral expenses and itemized by the state's exhibit 2 pursuant to the plea agreement. The defendant argues that the requested restitution should not qualify as direct economic loss since the victims' families received third-party donations. Now, that's not what they said. They gave like a whole list of stuff because it was already agreed upon. Okay, then they came back with that filing. And Anne was just reading off, this is what the Idaho Code says. So under this code and controlling precedent, directly injured families may receive full restitution despite third-party payments unless those third parties qualify as statutory victims through contractual obligations to pay. So then Ashley Jennings is saying, no, Anne, you are reading it wrong. And she cites State versus Cheney. Applying the Cheney analysis, in this case, charitable donations such as those received through GoFundMe arise from voluntary generosity rather than legal obligations. And now I'm curious if Anne's going to argue and say, once you state what you're using the money for, then you're legally, actually, you're supposed to use it for those reasons, according to the rules of GoFundMe. So is there actually a contractual relationship because how you have to use the funds? Very interesting argument. Nonetheless, since charitable donors lack contractual obligations to pay victims, they cannot qualify as statutory victims under Idaho Code, blah, blah. Therefore, their payments do not reduce the defendant's restitution obligation to the directly injured victims. This is also supported by public policy consideration focusing on making the victims of crime whole for defendant's criminal conduct rather than accounting for victims' good fortune in receiving community support. Lastly, the defendant argues that restitution should not be awarded based on defendant's ability to earn money or pay money given his 4 consecutive life sentences plus 10 years. Now, defendant's objection on page 4 provides clear authority for the courts to order restitution from life sentence defendants. The statute mandates that courts shall order a defendant found guilty of any crime which results in economic loss to the victim to make restitution to the victim unless the court determines restitution would be quote-unquote inappropriate or undesirable. The immediate inability to pay restitution shall be in and of itself a reason to deny restitution. State, baby, hey, baby, baby. While Idaho law permits restitution orders for life sentence defendants, courts retain discretion to determine whether restitution is appropriate in individual cases. So basically, when we all get down to the nitty-gritty, what Ashley Jennings and Bill Thompson are saying is that this discretion enables courts to consider the specific circumstances of life sentence cases, including the defendant's age, health, and realistic earning potential. In this case, there is a history of this defendant receiving financial compensation from family and third parties. Yes, by way of example, the state is attaching a summary of the financial contributions made to defendant while he was in custody at the Ada County Jail and the Latah County Jail. Ashley Jennings, who are you calling out, girl? Because I know you ain't calling out me, baby. So, who over there has been donating to Brian Kohlberger? Because guess what? The state put your name on blast and provided it as an exhibit in this proceeding. Ashley Jennings. Well, who's on that list? Let me know. Who do we think is on the list? Well, I want to know if Annie Peterson's on the list. Annie Peterson, I think she actually removed her whole channel, but I'm just curious if Annie Peterson's on that list. So basically, the ProBurgers of the world, this is Ashley Jennings. Put your information in an exhibit. Oh, hell. Now, for right now, it is sealed, but I think it's public. I think it's public information. I'd have to double check that. So, who over there is buying socks for? Who's over there buying socks? Who's over there buying Twinkies? Come on, man. Who's over there buying that commissary? What else can you buy over there? So there it is. Ashley Jennings bringing the hammer down, and she's like, he most certainly can make money because people are just putting money on his books. Okay. And so therefore that money should go to the families and should not go to, his commissary. So in the event the defendant is able to obtain financial compensation from third parties or family, now I think you should leave the family part out of it, in my opinion. In my opinion, if his family, and how I can see Hitler ruling on this is something like that. But then they're just going to say, oh, well, then people could just go give it to his family and then his family could put it on his books and blah, blah, blah. But in the event that the defendant is able to obtain financial compensation from third parties or family, the victim should have ready access to these assets for the satisfaction of their losses. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I have to look it up. But I'm just curious the dollar amount. What are we talking about here? What is the dollar amount that Brian Kohlberger has received from third parties? I also want to know how many pairs of tits has Brian Kohlberger received? How many people have sent nudes to Brian Kohlberger? I mean, that's what, people were saying. I'm just curious on the count there. But are we talking like, let's say that there's, just for math's sake, let's say 50 people sent the dude something in terms of whether it's $1, which I think actually you have to send a certain amount because when you buy like that Page A, whatever the hell it is, at the end of the day, what are we talking about here? If there's 50 people, let's even say that everybody gave $100. I mean, that's absurd. But let's say that 50 people gave $100. What is that? That's 5 G's, right? Yeah. I want to know the dollar amount. I'm just curious how much money has over the course of time from 2022 to present day has been put on the books for Brian Kohlberger. You don't need to dox anybody. I'm just curious the number of people and the total dollar amount. What do you guys think? There you go. See, yeah, Jay pays a $10 minimum. See, something like that. Yep. Okay, let's see. My video ready? What the heck is going on? What is this video doing? Was going perfectly fine. Did it freaking stop because I went live? Fuck. I might just be uploading it afterwards. That's crazy. So there it is. At the end of the day, they're going to have a hearing over this. on 11/5, which is next week. Additionally, this case has and will continue to attract worldwide attention, which could result in the defendant prospectively receiving money subject to interception by the state treasurer pursuant to this. Restitution orders may be recorded as civil judgments. Yep, and should be collectible from any monies prospectively deposited in the escrow with the state treasurer. I want to hear more about this. I want to hear this oral argument here. So, are they talking about like if his family's dumb enough to gift him something when they die? I don't know. Ashley, if you would have just not have been lazy, this could have all been included in the dollar amount from the get-go. There's Ashley, there's Bill. Like, how do you mess this up? You know what I mean? Like, this should have all been agreed upon back on that August 27th date. And now the families have to go through this again. And just sit over here and just act like we have no idea why this happened. And I'm telling you, it's because the families probably provided the receipts and said that we want to be reimbursed. So, and then Ashley's looking at this receipt like, holy shit. I don't know. This is how you can also tell that there's no communication. Zero communication. Okay, now we have a problem. All right. It looks like if I want to upload this, I'm going to have to get off so that I can finish the upload. So it looks like I will be back in just a minute. Come back and join me in the next thread. Peace.